The first thing everyone noticed was the car. Not the man standing beside the open bay door. Not the little girl in the office doorway with a chipped silver toy car pressed to her chest. Not the way Marcus Callen lifted his head before the flatbed even turned into the lot. As if he had heard something in the distance that no one else knew how to hear. Just the car. Black and silver. Low enough to look like it had been poured onto the trailer instead of built. With carbon panels shining under a gray Ohio morning and a dead engine sitting behind the cabin like a locked vault. Across the side of the transport trailer, in letters too polished for the cracked asphalt outside Callen Auto and Machine, was the name Kline Velocity Group. By the time the driver dropped the ramps, 11 people had stopped what they were doing. 2 customers stood near the coffee machine with paper cups in their hands. Ray Bell, Marcus's part-time helper, held a box of brake pads against his hip and forgot to set it down. 3 men in Navy engineer jackets stepped out of a black SUV, followed by 2 assistants carrying tablets. A delivery driver paused beside the tire rack. Lily Callen stood half-hidden behind the office door, her homework folder under one arm and her little silver toy car in her hand. Then Vanessa Kline stepped out of the second SUV in a fitted black suit, looked at the peeling sign above the garage, and smiled like the place had already disappointed her. The Echelon EB-16 Nocturne came down the ramp without making a sound. It was supposed to sound like thunder trapped inside polished metal. Instead, the winch cable clicked and the tires whispered over steel. Marcus wiped his hands on a red shop towel and watched the rear vents. He did not look impressed. He did not look afraid either. Vanessa noticed that first, and it bothered her. Men usually became smaller around that car. They stared. They asked permission. They tried to sound smart. Marcus only listened to the small ticking noises coming from the cooling metal. Even though the engine had not run that morning, Marcus Callen, Vanessa asked, though she said his name like she had read it from a receipt and found it too ordinary. "That's me." Marcus said, "My assistant said you were close enough to take delivery while my team recalibrates." She glanced around the garage. At the oil stain near Bay 2 and the hand-painted sign Lily had made that said, "Dad can fix almost anything. I assume you understand this vehicle is worth more than this building." One of the engineers smirked. Lily's fingers tightened around the toy car. Marcus noticed, but his face did not change. He walked toward the Echelon slowly, stopping 3 feet from the rear quarter panel, close enough to smell warm carbon, old fuel, and the faint burnt metal scent that clung to engines people kept trying to wake without understanding why they were sleeping. "What's it doing?" he asked. Vanessa gave a short laugh. "It's doing nothing. That's why it's here." Marcus looked at the lead engineer. "Does it crank?" "For 11 seconds. The engineer said before he could stop himself. "Then it cuts. Same every time." Vanessa's eyes moved sharply toward him. She did not like information leaving her control. Marcus nodded once. "Not random." Then, that was the first moment the garage changed. Not much. Just enough. Ray looked up from the brake pad box. One customer lowered his coffee. Vanessa crossed her arms. Marcus crouched by the rear intake, not touching anything, only tilting his head toward the engine bay. If it dies at the same time, every cycle, it may not be the fuel map. It may be heat transfer through the block sleeve. The words landed badly, not because they were loud, but because they were calm. Vanessa stared at him, then looked around the small garage as if inviting everyone else to hear how absurd he sounded. "I'm sorry," she said. "Did the owner of a 2-bay brake shop just diagnose my prototype hypercar by standing near it?" A few people laughed. Not everyone. "Enough." Marcus stood. "I said it may be worth checking." Vanessa stepped closer, her heels clicking on the concrete. "Mr. Callen, I pay $800 an hour engineers to check this car. I have flown in specialists from 3 states and 2 countries. We have spent $2 million trying to solve this issue. She turned slightly, making sure the engineers, the customers, Ray, the delivery driver, and the little girl in the doorway could hear every word. Then she pointed at Marcus's stained shirt and said, "I pay $800 an hour engineers, not grease monkeys." The garage went still in the ugly way a room does when everybody knows a line has been crossed, and nobody wants to be the first to admit it. One engineer looked down. One of the customers stared into his coffee. Lily took one step backward into the office, but she did not close the door. Marcus did not look at Vanessa. He looked at his daughter. Just once. A small look, enough to tell her he was still standing, still breathing, still himself. Then he looked back at the engine bay and saw something through the narrow opening beneath the rear cover. A curve in the casting. A small ridge where no modern service block should have had one. Dust and carbon covered most of it, but not all. 2 letters sat half hidden in shadow. EB. Marcus's hand closed around the shop towel. For half a second, his face changed. Not fear, not surprise exactly. Recognition, like seeing a ghost in a crowd and realizing it had been waiting for him the whole time. Vanessa saw the change and mistook it for embarrassment. "Don't touch it," she said. "Unless you're ready to buy a car you can't afford to wash." Marcus straightened. His voice stayed even. "Then leave the intake form on the desk. If the car is stored here, I need written limits on what I can and cannot inspect." Vanessa almost laughed again, but something about the way he said written made her pause. People who knew paperwork did not say the word like a shield. They said it like a tool. She nodded to one assistant, who placed a folder on the office counter near Lily. The little girl looked at the folder, then at the car, then at her father's hands. "Stay with this." Because the part everyone called broken was hiding a name. And by morning, the woman who laughed at him would be standing in the same garage, unable to speak. Not because the car started, but because the engine had been carrying Marcus Callen's mark for 17 years, the cold morning turned into a wet afternoon. Vanessa left 2 engineers behind, with instructions Marcus was not invited to hear. He went back to the Buick in Bay 2. Its owner, Mrs. Perez, from the 3rd block, had called twice about the noise. He fixed the noise. He did not think about the other car. "Not much. You keep doing that," Ray muttered. "And the landlord's going to start accepting muffins as rent." Marcus closed the Buick's hood. "Her son gets paid Friday. Your lease is due in 11 days. "I know. Knowing doesn't make money appear." Marcus gave him a tired half-smile. "Neither does scaring old ladies." Ray looked toward the office window. Lily was inside at the little desk, knees tucked under her, pretending to do math while watching the hypercar through the glass. She heard that woman. "I know that too." 7 years earlier, Marcus had been the kind of man who designed around problems like this. Now he was the kind of man who washed his hands twice and still found grease in the knuckle lines. The sleeve Rev C mark was not there by accident. He had put it there. Marcus dried his hands and walked into the office. Lily did not look up right away. She pushed her toy car forward and backward beside her worksheet, its chipped silver paint catching the weak light from the desk lamp. "Homework winning?" Marcus asked. "No. Need backup. It's fractions." She made a face. "Nobody wins." Marcus sat on the edge of the second chair. Through the window, the Echelon looked too large for the garage, like something that had not yet realized where it had landed. Lily was quiet in the way she got when she was deciding whether to be scared. After a moment, Lily asked, "Dad, yeah. Bug, are grease monkeys bad?" Marcus did not answer too quickly. That mattered. Children remembered rushed answers because they knew adults used them to cover holes. He looked at her toy car, then at his hands. "No," he said. "People say things like that when they want someone else to feel small. But are they small?" She nodded. Marcus leaned back and listened to the rain tapping against the office window. Machines are built by hands before they're bought by money. Some people forget that. Lily thought about it. She had a lot of money. She did. And her car still didn't work. Marcus almost smiled. That also happened. Lily's shoulders loosened a little. But not all the way. Can you fix it? Marcus looked through the glass at the two engineers standing near Bay. One of them was scrolling on his phone. The other kept glancing at the car as if it might accuse him of something. I can look at it, Marcus said. Only what they gave written permission for. That's not what I asked. No, it was not. Lily had Emily's way of finding the exact spot where a sentence tried to hide. Marcus reached across the desk and tapped the roof of her toy car. I don't know yet. But you think something? I think people sometimes spend a lot of money asking the wrong question. Lily nodded as if that made sense. In a way, fractions did not. After closing, Marcus locked the front door, but left the bay lights on. The two engineers stayed. Marcus took the intake folder and read every line twice. Then said aloud that he was conducting a non-invasive visual inspection under the signed terms. One engineer looked up. The other kept scrolling his phone. The sleepy engineer lifted his head. You always narrate your life. Only when someone expensive might lie about it later. The engineer had no answer for that. Marcus opened the rear service light and leaned toward the engine bay. He moved the beam by small degrees until the access gap opened past the sleeve housing. There it was again. EB-16. His breath slowed. Marcus adjusted the light. More of the mark appeared beneath a film of carbon dust. Blockschütten. Below it. Smaller. Almost swallowed by darkness. One letter and a curve that might have been another. M. C. The garage dropped away for a moment. Just one room from 2009. A white design lab. Coffee gone cold. A younger Marcus, standing over a block model with the machining list in one hand and his wife Emily's voice in the other end of the phone. She had been telling him to come home. He had said 5 more minutes. He had always said 5 more minutes. Small things hold big promises. Marcus lowered the light. The engineer on the folding chair stood up. Problem. Marcus looked at him. Maybe. Then tell Ms. Kline. Not yet? Why? Because I don't know whether your company owns what it thinks it owns. The engineer frowned. He was young enough to hear the danger in that sentence, but not senior enough to know what to do with it. Before he could ask more, headlights swept across the rain-streaked windows. Vanessa Kline had returned. She came in with Dominic Vale, her lead engineer, a tall man with silver hair, a navy coat, and the controlled irritation of someone used to being the smartest person in every room. Vanessa did not remove her gloves. She looked from Marcus to the open service light to the intake folder placed carefully under the camera. I was told you were inspecting, she said, under the signed limits. Dominic stepped forward. Mr. Callen, this vehicle uses a prototype grade system. Even visual misinterpretation can lead to liability. Marcus closed the service light gently. Visual misinterpretation is free. Your invoice history suggests the expensive kind is worse. The sleepy engineer coughed into his hand. Vanessa's eyes hardened. Dominic opened a tablet and spoke as if reciting for a boardroom. The failure is software managed. We have narrowed the issue to a security loop or a corrupted fuel map. Marcus nodded toward the car. Then why does it die at 11 seconds? Dominic blinked. That is the symptom. No, Marcus said. That's the clock. Symptomswanda. Clocks tell you what condition has been met. Vanessa stepped between them. Enough. I did not bring this car here to be second-guessed by a man whose largest posted service is a $128 diagnostic. Marcus looked past her at Lily's office light. His daughter had fallen asleep on the old couch, her toy car still in her hand. He lowered his voice. Then take it somewhere else. I will. Vanessa said, "But first, understand something. If you create any issue with this vehicle, if you delay my investor showcase, if you so much as imply to anyone that my company does not know what it owns, I will make calls. Your landlord? Your insurer? The city licensing office. I doubt a garage like this enjoys attention." There it was. The insult had become a threat with teeth. Not just pride. Lease. Insurance. License. The three thin ropes holding Callen auto and machine above water. Marcus felt Ray's warning from earlier settle in his chest. 11 days until rent. A child asleep in the office. A dead wife's photo on the shelf. A car in his bay that should not have carried his mark. He did not raise his voice. "Put that in writing too." Vanessa stared. "Excuse me, if you're threatening my license over a signed intake inspection, put it in writing." Dominic looked at her, a small warning in his eyes. Vanessa ignored it. She was too angry now to see that Marcus was not being stubborn. He was documenting the shape of the knife before she used it. "You think paperwork protects you?" she asked. "No," Marcus said. "I think truth does better when it has a timestamp." For the first time, Vanessa had nothing immediate to say. Then Dominic set his tablet on the workbench, perhaps to reclaim control. "Start cycle," he told the younger engineer. The young man hesitated. Here. Marcus stepped back. Vanessa folded her arms. Lily stirred behind the office glass but did not wake fully. The engineer connected the start module. The Echelon's dash lit up. Cold, blue, and white. A low whine came from the rear systems. Then the engine caught, for a moment. The whole garage filled with the sound it had been missing. Deep. Layered. Expensive. Almost alive. The two customers had gone. The delivery driver was gone. Ray was home. But the sound still made the small garage feel crowded. Vanessa's posture lifted as if the noise itself proved her right. Marcus watched the thermal readout on Dominic's tablet from 6 feet away. 7 seconds. 8. 9. He said quietly. "It will cut at 11. Dominic turned. "Obviously. You were told that... not like this. 10. The engine note changed by a hair. Not louder. Tighter. Marcus heard the sleeve move before the sensors admitted it. 11. The engine died so cleanly that the silence after it felt designed. Nobody moved. The young engineer looked from the car to Marcus. Dominic's jaw tightened. Vanessa's face did not change. But something behind her eyes did. Not belief. Not yet. Recognition that the man she had mocked had named the moment before it arrived. Lily was awake now. She stood in the office doorway, small and silent. The silver toy car held against her shirt. Marcus looked at her first, then at Vanessa. "That isn't a software failure," Dominic snapped. "You can't know that." Marcus pointed, not at the tablet, but at the rear engine bay. "The block is reaching a thermal condition. Something installed during service is telling the system the sleeve is unsafe. That is why it grants 11 seconds and then protects itself." "Installed during service," Vanessa repeated. Marcus did not look away. "Yes." One of the engineers shifted his weight. That small movement said more than a confession. Vanessa saw it and hated him for it. "You are implying my teams caused this." "I'm saying the car is doing exactly what it was designed to do when someone puts a small thing in the wrong way." The garage went quiet again. But this quiet was different from the insult. This one had weight. It made people think. Vanessa stepped closer. Her voice dropped. "You want to play expert, Mr. Callen? No. You want to embarrass my engineers? No. You want me to believe you know more than 20 people. I paid $2 million to solve this." Marcus looked at the car. Then at Lily. "I want you to stop threatening my garage in front of my daughter." That landed harder than he expected. Even Dominic looked away. Vanessa followed Marcus's glance to Lily. And for one brief second, something human moved across her face. It was gone quickly, covered by pride, pressure, and the kind of fear rich people disguised as anger. Fine, Vanessa said. 4 minutes. Dominic turned toward her. Vanessa, no. She held up a hand. He said it's a small thing installed wrong. He says my people missed it. 4 minutes. Under witness. No excuses. Marcus shook his head. I'm not performing tricks. You already started. I protected my business. You challenged mine. The rain had softened outside. But inside the garage, every sound became sharp. The cooling tick from the Echelon, the buzz of the lights, Lily's shoes against the concrete as she stepped out of the office. Marcus looked at Vanessa. If I touch that engine under your rules, we put terms in writing. Vanessa smiled thinly. Of course you do. Ray was not there. So Marcus called him. 10 minutes later, Ray came back in a hoodie with his hair flattened on one side from sleep. This better be either fire or money, he said, then saw everyone's faces. Looks like both. Marcus wrote the terms on a plain service agreement while the shop camera recorded overhead. He kept it simple, because simple things were harder to twist. If Marcus failed to make the engine idle beyond 11 seconds with one authorized adjustment, Callen Auto and Machine would waive all diagnostic fees, release the vehicle immediately, and make no repair claim. If Marcus succeeded, Vanessa Kline would withdraw any complaint to the landlord, insurer, or city licensing office, pay the expert diagnostic invoice, and authorize independent authentication of the engine block before the vehicle was moved. Ray read every word aloud. Dominic objected to the authentication clause. Marcus said nothing. Vanessa heard the word succeed and could not resist the chance to make him small in a measurable way. Sign it, she told Dominic. He signed as technical witness. Vanessa signed with a hard stroke of the pen. Ray signed beneath them. Then looked at Marcus. You sure? Marcus turned toward Lily. Go wait in the office. Bug. She did not move. I want to see. It might be loud. I know. He wanted to argue. He wanted to protect her from adults and their sharp edges. But part of him knew she had already seen the worst thing in the room. Not the engine. Not the money. The way people with power could try to name her father something less than he was. Stand by the door, he said. Lily nodded. Dominic started a timer on his phone with exaggerated care. 4 minutes from first tool contact. Marcus picked up a small driver. Not the big dramatic wrench people expected. Vanessa's mouth curved with disbelief. He opened the rear access cover. Reached past the polished service parts. And touched the edge of a sleeve-ground bridge, no wider than his thumbnail. He did not lecture. He did not explain the history. He only asked for the service light to be angled 12 degrees lower. The younger engineer moved before Dominic could stop him. Marcus saw the insert clearly now. Backward. Not broken. Not defective. Backward. A tiny orientation error made by someone who trusted a modern service diagram more than the old block sitting in front of him. Marcus loosened one fastener. Rotated the insert. Seated it with 2 fingers. And tightened it until the pressure felt right. Not too much. The part was small. And small things punished arrogance. Time, Dominic said. 2 minutes. 46. The younger engineer answered before remembering which side he was on. Marcus stepped back. Started. Vanessa looked at Dominic. Dominic looked at the engine as if it had betrayed him. Then he nodded. The start module lit again. The Echelon woke with the same deep layered sound. But Marcus heard the difference immediately. The tightness was gone. The note breathed through the block instead of fighting it. 7 seconds. 8. 9. Vanessa did not blink. 10. Lily held the toy car so tightly her knuckles whitened. 11. The engine kept running. 12. 13. Nobody spoke. 20. The younger engineer lowered his phone. Ray's mouth opened, then closed. Dominic stared at the thermal graph as if the numbers had become a different language. Vanessa looked at the engine, then at Marcus, then at the engine again. Marcus did not smile. He did not look victorious. He shut the engine down himself after 30 seconds and placed the small driver on the workbench. Ray whispered, "Well, I'll be damned." The younger engineer whispered something too, but stopped when Vanessa looked at him. Marcus picked up his phone and photographed the casting mark through the access gap, while everyone was still too stunned to stop him. EB-16 M.C. Sleeve Rev C. The letters were clearer now under the adjusted light. Old and undeniable. Vanessa found her voice at last. "The car runs. We're loading it." Marcus turned the phone screen off. "No." Her expression sharpened. "No, you signed authentication before movement." That was theater. It was a contract. Dominic stepped forward. "Mr. Callen, don't overplay this." Marcus looked at him. "I'm not playing anything." He walked to the office, found an old contact buried beneath years of numbers he had promised himself he would never use again, and sent the photo with no explanation except one line. "Need verification. EB-16 Sleeve Rev C. Callen." For almost a minute, nothing happened. The garage remained frozen around the softly ticking engine. Lily came to Marcus's side and slipped her small hand into his. Vanessa watched that, and for the first time that night, she looked less angry than uncertain. Then Marcus's phone buzzed. The message was from Arthur Bell. Marcus read it once. Then again. His face went still in a way Lily had never seen before. Arthur had written only 8 words. "Marcus, do not let them move that engine." Marcus read the message again, then put the phone in his shirt pocket. Screen down. The garage had gone completely still. Lily pressed herself against the doorframe. Marcus turned to Vanessa. Lily tugged gently at Marcus's hand. "Dad." Marcus turned the phone away and looked down at her. The silver toy car was still in her other hand, small enough to disappear in an adult palm. For a second, the garage was just his daughter watching his face, trying to learn whether she should be afraid. "It's okay," he said. Vanessa heard him and stepped forward. "Then we are finished. The vehicle runs. Load it." Marcus slipped the phone into his shirt pocket. "No." That single word landed harder this time. Earlier, "no," had sounded like stubbornness. Now it sounded like a door closing. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Callen, I allowed your little demonstration. You made your point. Send whatever invoice makes you feel respected. The agreement says independent authentication before movement." The agreement was signed under pressure in a repair shop at night. Ray lifted one finger. "On camera." Vanessa ignored him. "This car is required at an investor showcase in 5 days. I will not let a local mechanic hold a $3 million asset hostage because he found a scratch on an engine." Marcus looked at the rear bay. "It isn't a scratch." Dominic finally spoke. "What is it?" Then, Marcus did not answer right away. He walked back to the engine, turned on the service light, and angled it low. The mark appeared in fragments through the access gap. EB-16 M.C. Sleeve Rev C. To most people, it looked like manufacturing debris. To Marcus, it looked like a room in 2009. A name he had put there himself. "It's a design mark," Marcus said. Dominic frowned. "Service blocks have casting marks. Not this one." Vanessa gave a cold laugh. "You expect me to believe you can identify a 17-year-old prototype engine mark from memory?" Marcus looked at her then. Yes. The confidence in the answer made her angrier than any argument could have. People who guessed defended themselves. Marcus did not defend. He simply stood beside the engine, as if the metal and the truth had already reached an agreement without her. My archivist will be here in the morning. Marcus said, Your archivist, Arthur Bell. Dominic's face changed first. It was small, but Marcus caught it. A tightening near the eyes. A name recognized too late. Vanessa saw Dominic's reaction. Who is Arthur Bell? Dominic cleared his throat. He handled old homologation records for Echelon's early development programs. Marcus added, and he does not drive through rain at midnight for scratches. For the first time, Vanessa looked at the engine not as an asset, but as something she might not own, the way she thought she did. She stepped close enough that only Marcus, Ray, and Dominic could hear her. You have no idea what is tied to this car. Marcus glanced toward Lily, who stood by the office door now. Exactly where he had told her to stay. Then maybe you should have asked before insulting the man standing next to it. Vanessa's face hardened again. But the line had hit. She turned away first. Dominic. No one moves this vehicle until morning. And no one speaks to investors, press, staff, or anyone else about what happened here. Ray looked at Marcus as the two Kline engineers began making calls. You think she'll honor that Marcus watched Vanessa's assistant gathering folders from the SUV outside? No. That was why he stayed. The night stretched thin over Callen auto and machine. Rain stopped around 1 in the morning. Vanessa did not leave. She sat in the office chair across from Marcus's desk. Coat still on. Too proud to admit she had nowhere else the truth could go. Lily slept on the old office couch. Her toy car rested on the floor beside her hand. Around 3 in the morning, Vanessa said quietly, My father had hands like yours. Marcus did not look up. Most people's fathers did at some point. He built industrial pumps before the company became investment capital. She said it like the words tasted unfamiliar. Marcus closed the file box and let it exist without comment. You really think your name is on that engine? It was not a question. I don't think. Marcus looked at Lily asleep on the couch. Because rooms like yours do not hear men like me until metal speaks first. At 8:06 the next morning, Arthur Bell arrived in a beige station wagon, carrying a battered leather case and a canvas jacket with an Echelon development program patch on the shoulder. He had been retired for 11 years. He had come anyway. Arthur looked at Marcus first. For a few seconds, neither man spoke. 17 years sat between them. Design rooms. Missed calls. A funeral Arthur had sent flowers to. Then Arthur smiled faintly. You look older. Marcus nodded. You look the same. Which is unfair. Arthur's eyes moved to Lily. Then to the garage. Then to Vanessa. And this must be the emergency with expensive shoes. Ray coughed awake and whispered, I like him. Vanessa stepped forward. Mr. Bell. I'm Vanessa Kline, CEO of Kline Velocity Group. We appreciate your time, but I need to be very clear. This vehicle is under a strict investor schedule. Arthur set the leather case on the workbench. Engines are not impressed by schedules. He walked to the rear of the Echelon without asking permission. Vanessa started to object, but Dominic shook his head once. Arthur leaned in, took out a small inspection mirror, and asked Marcus, Where did you see it? Low left of the thermal sleeve access. Beneath the carbon film, Arthur adjusted the mirror, then froze. The garage went quiet around him. He did not gasp. He did not make the moment theatrical. He simply exhaled, slowly, like a man hearing a song he had not heard since another life. AB Neo Block Schutten, Arthur said. Sleeve revision C. Dominic swallowed. Vanessa looked from Arthur to Marcus. What does that mean? Arthur turned to her. It means this is not a standard production replacement block. It is a pre-production development casting from the Nocturne thermal program. Very limited, very documented, very inconvenient if someone sold it as something else. We did not sell anything. Vanessa said, "No," Arthur replied. "But you are presenting it to investors." The word investors changed the air. Vanessa's assistant, who had been standing near the office with a binder tucked under her arm, shifted her weight. Marcus noticed. So did Lily. From the couch where she now sat awake, quilt around her shoulders, Arthur opened his case and spread 3 archive sheets on the workbench, followed by a thin laptop and 2 photographs. Block Schutten. Sleeve, Revision C. Lead casting engineer, Marcus Callen. Nobody spoke. It was the first time Lily had heard her father's old name said in that voice. Not Dad. Not Marcus the mechanic. Something older. She looked at him and then at the document as if she was meeting a stranger who had his face. Vanessa stared at the document. That could be a duplicate record. Arthur looked offended. "I kept these records before your company learned to spell asset class." Ray whispered. "Definitely like him." Dominic stepped forward, his professional pride cracking. "The modern service documentation we received did not include sleeve revision C." Arthur turned to Vanessa. "Then bring the original diagnostic binder." Vanessa nodded to her assistant. "Mara." The assistant did not move immediately. Vanessa's voice sharpened. "Mara." Mara opened the binder with hands that were too careful. "Where are pages 42 through 47? Vanessa's face went still. "I don't know." Arthur looked at Mara. The assistant's eyes lowered. Dominic took the binder and checked. Those pages cover block provenance and revision exceptions. Marcus looked at Vanessa. "The pages that would have told your engineers what they were working on, I did not remove them," Vanessa said. Mara's face tightened. Arthur closed the binder. "Whether you removed them or benefited from their removal is a question for your board. But if this car is part of an investor presentation, incomplete provenance is not a clerical issue." Vanessa looked toward the Echelon. The car seemed different now. Still beautiful. Still expensive. But no longer obedient. It had become a witness parked under fluorescent light. She turned to Marcus. And for a second, anger gave way to something like panic. "What do you want?" Marcus did not ask for his old career back. "I want the agreement honored," he said. "And I want my daughter to hear you say my garage did not damage your car." Vanessa looked as if he had asked for something more humiliating than money. Arthur put the archive sheet back into his case. "There is also the investor matter. My board can handle that," Vanessa said. Arthur raised one eyebrow. "Can they?" The next 5 days moved like a machine, with a failing bearing. Vanessa's team tried to move the Echelon twice. Marcus showed them the signed agreement both times. Marcus worked customer cars during the day and stayed near the Echelon at night. On the morning of the showcase, Vanessa arrived without the confidence she had worn on the first day. Her suit was still perfect. Her certainty was not. "I know. You don't need to speak unless asked." "I know that too." Her jaw tightened. "This does not need to become a spectacle." Marcus looked toward Lily, who stood beside Ray with her toy car in her jacket pocket. "It became one when you made it one." The showcase was held in a private event hall, downtown, glass walls, polished floors, lights designed to make expensive things look inevitable. The Echelon sat at the center of a raised platform, lit from 4 angles, looking like a machine without a complicated history. Arthur sat in the back row with his leather case. Marcus stood off stage in his gray work shirt. Lily sat beside Ray near Arthur, her toy car in her jacket pocket. Vanessa walked onto the stage to applause. She spoke about heritage and engineering excellence until she got to the part about the vehicle's operational history. Then Vanessa introduced Dominic as the engineer who had overseen the vehicle's return to operational status. That was the mistake. Dominic stepped up, pale but willing. The issue was a thermal management irregularity. He said, Our team resolved it after extensive diagnostic review. Arthur closed his eyes like a man hearing a violin played badly. Marcus did not move. He had promised himself he would not chase credit across a stage. But Ray leaned down to Lily and whispered, "Watch your dad." Helen Rusk raised her hand from the board cluster. Before the start demonstration, "Mr. Bell, I believe your memo requested clarification." Vanessa's smile froze. Arthur walked forward with the slow patience of someone who had waited 17 years and could wait 10 more seconds. He did not look at Vanessa. He looked at the investors, then at the covered car. "The vehicle is operational," Arthur said, "but the statement that it is fully verified is incomplete unless the provenance correction is entered into the record." A murmur moved through the room. Vanessa stepped toward him. "Arthur, this can be handled after the demonstration." "No," Arthur said. "It should have been handled before the investors entered the room." The board chair turned to Dominic. "Mr. Val, who resolved the thermal issue." Dominic opened his mouth, closed it, looked toward Marcus. That look brought the room with it. For the first time, many of the investors noticed the man in the work shirt standing off stage. Marcus did not step forward until Helen Rusk asked his name. "Marcus Callen," he said. Arthur placed a scanned archive sheet on the presentation system. The screen behind the Echelon changed from Kline Velocity branding to an old technical record. The letters were large enough for the back row to read. EB-16 Sleeve Revision C. Lead casting engineer Marcus Callen. Then Arthur used a live inspection camera to show the matching mark inside the engine bay. EB-16 M. C. Sleeve Rev C. The room went silent. Not politely quiet, not confused quiet. Silent in the way people become when money, arrogance, and truth all arrive at the same place, and only one of them can remain standing. Lily looked at the screen, then at her father. Marcus's name was not on a uniform, not on a fancy office door, not on a plaque. It was inside the engine, hidden where no one had thought to look, doing its work without applause for 17 years. Helen Rusk's voice cut through the silence. "Ms. Kline, why was this provenance not disclosed in the investor packet?" Vanessa tried to answer. The documentation was still under review. Arthur spoke gently, which somehow made it worse. Pages 42 through 47 were missing from the diagnostic binder provided to the mechanic of record. The board chair looked at Mara, who stood near the side wall. Mara's face was pale, but she stepped forward. "I sent the original page log to the board this morning." Vanessa turned toward her. "Mara." Mara looked like she might break, but she did not step back. "I was instructed to remove the exception pages from the working copy because they complicated the showcase language." No one moved. The investors began whispering. The whispers did not help Vanessa. They built around her like water, rising in a small room. There was no shouting. A permanent consequence in rooms like that sounded like a motion carried and a name removed from a committee. Vanessa stood under the stage lights. Looking at the car she had treated as a symbol of control, it had become the proof of everything she had missed. Marcus turned to Arthur. "Start it," Arthur nodded. "It deserves to be heard correctly." Dominic stepped away from the module. Marcus walked onto the platform. He did not look at the investors. He did not look at Vanessa. He placed one hand near the rear panel, not touching the engine, only standing beside it the way he had in the garage when everyone laughed. Then he pressed the start control. The Echelon woke. This time, the sound filled a room built for money and made it feel too small for the thing it was hearing. 7 seconds passed. 8, 9, 10, 11. The engine kept breathing, deep and steady. No panic in the block. No false warning. No rich man's mystery. Just a machine doing what it had been designed to do when a small part was finally turned the right way. At 20 seconds, Marcus shut it down. No applause came at first. That was the second silence. The whole room had to rearrange itself around the truth before anyone knew what hands were supposed to do. Then one investor began clapping. Slowly. Another followed. Arthur did not clap. He only looked at Marcus and nodded once. Marcus stepped off the platform and walked to Lily. She ran the last 3 steps into him. He knelt before she reached him, and she wrapped her arms around his neck with the toy car trapped between them. Vanessa watched from the stage. Stripped of entourage and certainty, she looked at Lily first, then at Marcus. Whatever apology she had rehearsed in her head was useless now. She came down from the platform slowly. "Mr. Callen," she said. Marcus stood. Lily still pressed against his side. Vanessa looked at the child, and her voice became smaller. "Your father's garage did not damage my car." Lily stared at her. Vanessa swallowed. "Your father was right, and I was wrong to insult him." The room heard it. Arthur heard it. Most importantly, Lily heard it. Marcus did not add anything. He put one hand on his daughter's shoulder, and that was the whole answer. The Echelon returned 2 days later with a formal authentication order. Marcus signed the chain of custody form and went back to the Buick. Marcus was replacing a belt on a pickup when Vanessa came in. Ray vanished into the parts room. Vanessa waited until Marcus set his wrench down. The board finalized the interim review. "I heard. I've been removed from the acquisition committee. The investor package is suspended for 90 days. Dominic resigned from the technical review team." Marcus nodded. And Mara, she kept her job. Vanessa looked toward the office, where Lily's drawings were taped beside the old service calendar. "I made sure of that before they took the committee from me." That was the second honest thing she had done. Marcus accepted it with a nod. Not forgiveness, exactly, but recognition. Vanessa took an envelope from her coat. "Your invoice. Paid in full. Plus the consulting agreement Arthur recommended, independent, limited hours. Your schedule." Marcus did not take it immediately. "I'm not going back to that life. I know. No late-night calls that make me miss dinner. I know. No using my name to sell things I haven't verified." Vanessa's face tightened. Not with anger, but with the memory of consequence. "I know." Marcus took the envelope. "Then I'll read it." Vanessa looked through the office window at Lily coloring. "I stayed in design too long before I let it become something I had to defend." Marcus followed her gaze. "I was trying to impress someone." He nodded toward Lily. "Just not you." Something in Vanessa's face became respect, which was harder than admiration and worth more. Marcus looked back at the truck engine. "So, M.E." Vanessa left before sunset. Marcus finished the belt, washed his hands, and walked into the office. Lily was already at the workbench on her stool, the small engine sleeve sitting in a glass jar. Her toy car beside it. Emily's photo leaning against the shelf behind both. Lily climbed onto the stool and looked at the jar. Was the big car special because it was expensive? Marcus turned off the compressor. The sudden silence made the question feel important. "No," he said. "It was special because someone built it carefully. And because someone finally looked closely." Lily touched the glass jar with one finger. "Your name was inside it." "Yes." "Were you sad nobody knew?" The young man in 2009 might have said yes. The widower in 2019 might not have known how to answer. The father, standing in the garage in 2026, looked at his daughter, his workbench, and Emily's photograph. "Not tonight," he said. Lily picked up the toy car, then set it back beside the jar. "It should stay here." "Why, so Mom can see it?" Marcus looked at Emily's photo. The light from the open bay door caught the edge of the glass. Then the tiny metal sleeve. Then the chipped roof of the toy car. Small things. A child's toy. A corrected insert. A name hidden in an engine. A promise kept late. But kept. He reached for the wall switch. One row of lights went dark. Then another. The garage settled into evening. Lily ran back from the doorway and grabbed his hand before he could pretend he did not need it. Together, they stepped outside into the cool air. Behind them, on the workbench, beneath Emily's picture, the silver toy car and the little engine sleeve caught the last strip of sunset. Marcus squeezed Lily's hand and whispered the words Emily used to say when the world overlooked something small. Small things hold big promises. And this time, Lily whispered it back.